back to another episode of Making a Difference in Mental Health. I'm your host, Danielle Young, with my co-host.
Hi, this is Wendy, and I'm back. I was away, a little hiatus, but it's good to be back in the chair next to my co-host, Danielle, so we can talk about topics for today in our podcast.
Yes, I'm excited to have Wendy back, but I'm also excited to have our special guest today. Today, we're going to be talking about social media and the impact of social media. Our special guests are Ms. Valerie Hernandez, who happens to be a community schools therapist, along with the team that I work with as well, and her sister, Ms. Stephanie Hernandez, who is pursuing a master's in public health at Virginia Tech. Welcome, ladies.
Woo! Thank you so much for having us.
Welcome, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. And we just kind of wanted, well, before we get started with some of the questions, give us a little bit more, our audience, about who you are. Tell us about yourselves.
Sure. I can start. So obviously, I mean, like you said, I'm a community schools therapist here at ABH, and I've been in this field since 2015. So I've worked with a wide array of folks in different populations. And, I'm excited about this episode because social media, I feel like always somehow has something to do with our lives, no matter what kind of field we're working in. So I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I, Stephanie, I am, like you said, Danielle, I am a first year Master's of Public Health student. I kind of focus more on public education right now. And I just started working as an external evaluator for a tobacco prevention initiative in rural Appalachia. And I think right now we're doing a lot of social media involvement in the community. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of talk a little bit more about that. And mental health is everywhere. So I'm very encouraged and happy to be here today.
Great.
Absolutely. We're just happy to have you all here and to break down this conversation about social media. So I think Wendy's going to go ahead and start with some questions. And ladies, let's just chat.
So awesome. I wanted to kick our conversation off with chatting about generations. Do you all think about what generation you fit in? So I was doing a little bit of research, and there seems to be about 5 different generations, from baby boomers to Gen Z. And so when I was looking at my birthday, I'm not going to share, I seem to fall on the cusp of baby boomer 2 and Gen X. And so I think that also plays a part in how much we value social media and how much we use social media. And I think I'm the oldest one here, right? And so thank you so much. But it's great to hear like where you guys fit into. Am I talking to a millennial? Am I talking to a Gen X? I know I'm not talking to a baby boomer, but where you two fit into all of this?
So I'm a millennial. I feel like I think I'm right smack dab in the middle. I was born in 91.
Kind of,
I don't know what. I had to think about that.
91.
So millennial here.
You are.
Yep. Yes. I technically also fall in the category of millennial, although I am generally like the last, 2 years from Gen Z. But I basically grew up with the same millennial. I guess social media was not a thing back then too, so I relate more.
Right.
Right. And for me, I am a millennial by like 1 or 2 years, and then I fall in. I could easily be a Gen X or millennial, but I also feel like all of us that are either at the tail end, we're kind of like bridging the gap between the generations. Yeah. And so, I definitely get where maybe the boomer generation might not really understand social media or the benefits of it. But I also understand where the generation just before me, it's kind of like, well, do we like it? Do we not like it? Do we want to use it? It has its costs and it has its challenges, but the benefits and the challenges. So yeah, that's kind of where I fall in with that particular range of generation.
Right. I'm a boomer, and I'm on the end, right at the tail end before I become a Gen X. So, but growing up, we didn't have social media. No one had cell phones. No, we played. We went outside and we played. And so my generation, even the boomer ones, valued hard work, family, privacy, all that kind of stuff. And so me getting into, just doing podcasting is, a big deal because I'm like, wait a minute, what? I'm going to be talking in front of people and talking about things and using social media as a platform to kind of spread it all everywhere. So, you have to kind of sit back and think about that. But so, you guys are probably in the generation that I research a little tech savvy. You pick up technology quick.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I feel like definitely my experience. First of all, I want to know that it's really interesting that there's 3 of us here, myself not included, that are like right on the cusp of generations. And I think that that's really important to know. And I think also when it comes to like millennials, at least around the years, Stephanie and I are only like 3 years apart.
Yeah.
And I think for us, we saw the rise of social media. Like we weren't just like born into it. We saw how like it went from, like you said, Wendy, we played outside. Like Stephanie was climbing trees and getting stuck in trees, and we were playing soccer and with our neighbors. And then suddenly we also had social media. Around the time I became a teen or preteen, there was social media. So it's really interesting.
Grew up with it.
Yep. That we
As
kind of had like
grew, we also grew. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for me, I was still the play outside generation, even up until after high school. I kind of also don't want to say my age either, but I can remember Facebook, wondering what is a Facebook. I didn't know. I was already out of college, or at least 1 year out of college, when this new booming thing came. I still had my college email though, so I could still use it. I don't even know if you all know this, but Facebook was only accessible to college students, and I was 1 year after Facebook came.
And didn't we have MySpace or something before that?
MySpace. I don't know if I had a MySpace, but I had
heavily on MySpace. I was coding.
We were coding on MySpace.
That's right. You had to code and, like,
your profiles.
Hopefully I'm saying that correct. But yes, and I kind of feel like it's my brother's generation. I have a younger brother who's 20. It's his generation now who is so tech savvy, like you said, or just instantly able to
19-year-old
push a button and
19-year-old who comes home from college break and fixes all of our like computer needs and so internet savvy and phone savvy. She's like our little IT person. Okay, and I hope you all remember. Bye. I'm going back to school. So that's what we get. It's funny.
Yeah, definitely can't relate.
Even with myself, like having to help my dad or my mom who are in the boomer. Actually, I think
they're boomer one.
My dad is
the boomer two.
My dad is the older, so I would think boomer 1, and then my mom is the boomer 2.
Okay.
But even having to help them with the little bit of knowledge that I have, getting them up to date and up to speed, they're so used to, like, there was the typewriter, and then there was a word processor, then there was a computer, and now we have all of these accessible portable things. And so, that also is a challenge as well. But I think what we wanted to also talk about were some of the pros and cons
of social media,
and try to also either link it with Valerie, say like our clients, or Stephanie, with some of the people that you work with when it comes to, again, the pros and cons of social media, mental health, emotions, thoughts, feelings, and how our younger generations and even the older generations react to it. What are your thoughts?
I don't know if you want to start.
Oh yeah. So in the work that I'm doing right now, I can't really talk to the population that we're serving because they are Gen Z, but obviously they're very I guess secretive when it comes to their own social media use. But we know that they use it, so we use it to our advantage. So, we get them involved because social media is to them something that is worth their attention. So we look for ways that can be used to our advantage in like photo interviews where they have to make their own little social media interview of what the topics that we choose. So the pro is, social media is, right? It's not good or bad, but the situations that are in social media are the things that make it good or bad. So we try and find ways to make it beneficial to health outcomes, and mental health is one of them, so that we can also play a part in creating that space in a positive way. And then obviously cons, I feel like Valerie can also give you really good ideas.
It's so interesting because I find myself focusing so much on the pros. I tend to be one of the people that feels, I think maybe because it was such a big part of my growing up, I see so much of the good that it can do. And as a social worker, I can, I think of, through social media, people organize, there's mutual aid. People find out that there's nothing wrong with them, and that they, through awareness efforts and public health efforts and different apps and things like that, people can see like, oh wow, there's nothing wrong with me. I just had ADHD, or of course, and I think that's a hot button topic right there, right? Because there's a lot of self-diagnosing going on right now, which is its own issue, which is a con. But I mean, I think it's very effective in raising awareness, right?
Yes.
And I think that that's really important, because part of mental health is also people's socio-emotional health. And if people feel ostracized and marginalized and alone and isolated, and maybe, folks with different disabilities or different marginalized communities find communities online and in social media. And I think that that's a huge, huge pro. We're social beings, and a lot of folks, for different reasons, especially in society today, in my opinion, are outcast. And then they find like families in social media, right? Like there's a Facebook group for everything. There's a hashtag for everything, and I just think that that's really, really good. As far as cons, I mean, how much misinformation is there, Stephanie? Like, like in terms of public
talk about it every day.
Yes, just look at the last 2 years. So much misinformation.
Yes, that's the first
the vaccine, the virus,
And that's a perfect example of how I feel like right now, social media, it's just so governed by these private companies that really have only one thing in mind, and that's their own capital. So you have their terms and conditions policies where they're supposed to be, searching for that misinformation, searching for that whatever it is that goes against public health issues. And you don't really have any type of censoring or like protocol for them to actually enforce it. So you see like communities where are supposed to be used for good have kind of like a opportunity to be, misused or portrayed in a negative way.
That makes
me think of, Stephanie, earlier. Oh, that's okay. I like what you said, Stephanie, earlier about how situations are manipulated. It's not so much the platform of social media, it's the situations that are used or misused by, like you said, companies and other people. So go ahead, Valerie. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. So that is exactly, it made me think of, like you said, Facebook and that whole whistleblower thing where like apparently, it was like the whistleblower disclosed that Facebook purposefully shows people content that is going to make them experience like really strong emotions, like that kind of thing, coupled with, individual users, and can obviously create these negative environments and spaces for people's mental health, right? And so then it's like, how do we reconcile that? Because social media, I mean, in my opinion, is like a Pandora's box. It's only like, it's transforming and growing and growing and growing. And it's like, we can't just be like, never mind, we don't want to use this anymore.
Because companies aren't doing that.
And I think you both bring up really good ideas. Social media is here. Is one of those things that is just not going away. And there, as you've already mentioned, there are so many pros. And Valerie, I like how you said you so much think of the pros. And you've mentioned so many good things so far already. In addition to, some of the cons with how social media can drive emotion, and they can drive, a person to go down this rabbit hole, or they can sway a person very hard in the right or left direction, not necessarily political. I'm not speaking that way, but I'm just saying either or. You're on the right or left side of an issue, and that's how social media can really move or sway or persuade someone's opinion. And also for me, when it connecting it to mental health and connecting it to some of even our clients or maybe even some of our peers, is how it can impact our self-esteem or it can impact the way, our self-image or the way that we value ourselves. Or, sometimes we may, especially for our younger ones, they might look at someone and see, this is what I want to be, or this is how I want to dress, or this is how I want to look, not knowing that. And I
filter,
right,
a filter,
right.
Yes.
And sometimes I even say, like, for every one great selfie shot that's posted up on the internet, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, it's like 50 other videos that never made it, or 50 other pictures that never made it. And so I would say that for me is one of the cons when it does come to being a clinician, and maybe even research. Like, Stephanie, I hear you were mentioning a lot of research. I would love to see in just 10 years the impact of social media now, also post-COVID, because for 2 years we're at home, and social media, the pro in it was that this was the way we remained and stayed connected. And now that we're kind of coming back out, we're starting to see a lot of the impacts that social media has had, good and challenging.
Exactly.
I was just, I saw this, recently I saw this article about TikTok. So I was looking at the statistics and it's crazy. So for Facebook, it's mainly Gen X and boomers and some millennials that are on it, but Gen Z is completely dropping
Instagram,
off of it.
TikTok.
And then they're on TikTok, and so TikTok, I think of what you said earlier, Wendy, like what your generation values. Privacy was one of them. And so it's so interesting because this article was talking about how Gen Z is so different from like so many other generations, where they are constantly recording themselves like crying and having mental breakdowns and talking about like, very openly about mental health and trauma. It's so,
because this is a generation that's transparent. They are like authentic. When I talk to my daughter, that's like the biggest thing for her, like fakeness. Our generation, we're all about what's real, what's authentic, what's whatever. So that's why they are on TikTok, filming themselves 24/7. I look at her pictures, some of them I'm like, well, you weren't smiling. And she's like, well, that was the mood of the time.
those are the vibes. Those are the vibes.
That's the vibe.
That's hilarious to me. But really, that's what the generation is. And I think, this is a good segue into, let's unpack that for a minute. Like, why so much focused on TikTok and TikTok challenges where people, completely lose their minds and do really foolish things that can end up hurting people, or that just need to be 24/7 in the spotlight doing something to get those likes, to get that love. So what do you ladies think?
Got it. Steph,
Go
did I
ahead.
cut you off?
No, go ahead.
I'm just thinking of my clients. I'm thinking of especially like the preteen and adolescent populations that we work with, or I've worked with. I think there's two things, because obviously nothing exists in a vacuum. So I think we have to, like, at least the way that I approach it clinically is I think of like, where are my clients, and especially whoever I'm working with, and when I'm thinking of the individual, where are they developmentally, right? Like, are they in the stage where their peers are the most important thing, and social acceptance into the social group is going to be the most important thing? And I feel like that really does impact their involvement in social media, and to what extent and what trends they do. I'm thinking, I remember back when I was around that age, Tumblr came later, but there was one called Zanga. There was so many different spaces that were like pseudo social media, like the beginning of it. And I remember that back then, what was really, really like common for girls, at least, within my age range, was like eating disorders and self-harm was something that people had trouble with their daughters doing because their peers were doing it. And so sometimes when I hear that that kind of stuff is happening now, on top of all the other things that are happening, that they get ideas like from TikTok or, that's really important. And I think ultimately, I think that begs the question of like, one, how do we weigh the pros and cons? And two, like, to what extent is it the responsibility of the social media platform? Is it the responsibility of the parent? Is it the responsibility of the user? I think that that's where everything gets really gray. And then our work is really cut out for us when we're working with, clients impacted, because social media is huge. I can't think of the word. It's just like in everything. It's in everything,
It's hard to break the barrier, or break that wall down that my self-esteem is dependent on this social media. It's dependent on my Instagram pictures. It's dependent on my TikTok likes. It's dependent on everything. And so, for us as mental health professionals, that's a struggle. Like, how do we break through that to get our younger clients to understand that, there's way more than social media defining who you are and what you can do in this world. So it's a real struggle, I think, on our end.
I think that's why I find that a lot of, because like you said, Gen Z is it's an authentic generation. And Gen Z, sometimes I'm watching creators, I'm on TikTok, I'm watching creators and I'm like, oh my God, like when I find out that they're Gen Z, like they're minors, like they're in high school and they're talking about these issues and they're saying like, no, I'm not going to wear a filter. And they're like, they will boycott filters that supposedly there's no filter and there is a filter because they're aware of the issues, while my generation was not.
Exactly. I see that a lot more because, like, going back to what you were saying, when I was their age, that's all I cared about, right? Like the fitting the image, especially in those high school ages where you really went from being an individual to trying to just like fit yourself in a box, wherever that is. But now, like, I remember when I was doing a little bit of outreach after college, all these kids were the ones that were like saying, oh no, miss, we don't wear makeup. Oh no, miss, we don't wear like tight clothes. Like, they understand now, but still there does seem to be like, I feel like, especially in girls, with boys, like, I don't know, there's more like this like physical like aggression type thing where when they bully in person. And like girls, like they tend to like do relational like bully. So it's even harder for young girls because it's a perfect platform. So it's kind of like understanding where that fine line is between, yes, they understand their worth and they're understanding that your worth is not in like what's behind a camera, but there's also that other side that we do see a lot of mental health struggles because that's where they're doing most of their interactions.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's conditioning, with boys, go outside and play, be rough and tough, whether that was in the 1950s up until today. It's still, it's
they're
still
more physical.
Like, you learn how to be masculine by being out there and being rough and tough. And with young ladies or women, we're conditioned from a very young age to be either prim, proper, demure, There's a way that you move throughout society in decorum, and that can also translate into social media. So even though I'm not going to fight you as a girl in person, I can use my words, I can use my wit, I can use my popularity. And I wish that I had come up with this. I didn't, but a good friend of mine said that sometimes the way that you earn either the popularity or the way that you earn the recognition on social media is through social currency. So your picture, the best picture, the most likes, the most hearts, the most viewed is your currency, which brings you up, which makes you more valuable. And I feel like, for guys and girls in their own way, that, is what we see sometimes perpetuated. And it does then impact mental health. It impacts your self-esteem. It impacts even your status where you are in friend groups, whether we are on virtually or in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's why people are trying to figure out if social media is in fact addictive, because it might not and I don't know, Valerie, you can touch on this. It might not actually be addictive, but the interaction can, especially when you're talking about self-esteem, can be something that's very alluring and easy to buy into. If you're talking about like that social currency that's so easy to achieve if you're good at it,
It's that instant
I think
gratification,
Stephanie,
the reward. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Valerie. You and
No,
I.
yeah, I know. I feel like we're always on the same wavelength. That's why. But I think I 100%. It's when it comes to social media, like I would again. I think of, as we're talking, I'm thinking of all the things my clients have ever told me, where it's like, oh, but she didn't even have that many followers, like as if that is like.
There you go.
That's your point.
That value, and it's like, okay, and that kind of like, well, I posted the picture, but you have to post it at a certain time because most people are going to see it, and if not, then I deleted it because it didn't get enough likes. And it's like, I can totally understand how, because that instant gratification is accessing the reward centers of your brain, and if you don't get it, how's that low going to feel if you don't get that dopamine hit every time, and
right, and I think that low is bad, and that's why people up the ante and post more provocative types of pictures or post more times during a day, because I think it is addictive. I think it might be addictive, and
I think the same thing. Just as I'm not sure if it's in the DSM-5. I feel like gaming might either be in the DSM-5, like video gaming or game. You've heard of even gamer rage. I mean, that's still a form of social media too, where kids are playing video games and they connect with each other.
There's so many spaces. Yep.
I said I would believe that maybe DSM-6 or 7 years from now, there may be a diagnosis even for either social media addiction or some type of connection to that, which could also lead to another challenge or another underlying social issue maybe down the line. We'll begin to hear about this. Wendy and I often talk about it too, about studying the cohort, this particular generation, the pre and post COVID generation, maybe 10 or 20 years from now, and see the impact and the probabilities and the percentages of how social media has impacted. And one more thing, what we've been talking about, the different generations of privacy versus just, everything being all out. I also feel the bridge, like those bridge generations, like I'm okay with certain things being posted, but I still value my privacy.
Right.
Whereas, my little brother who's 20, just turning 20, I'm like, dude, like, do you have to post that? But I'm being real, Danielle, like, this is what it is. And I'm like, okay, as long as you're comfortable, as long as it's safe, and as long as you're not, compromising your yourself.
Yes.
So there is a value in that, that this generation Z wants to be authentic. Like, being fake is the worst thing that you could possibly be, and they'll pick it out quick. Yeah, that person's fake. We don't deal with them because they're fake. So, I need someone to keep it real. I need it 100, and this is who I am, and you have to accept who I am, et cetera, et cetera. Many conversations with the 18-and-a-half-year-old. Anyway.
And she's been a guest on the show.
She's been a guest on the show. She
very candid.
I love that.
Very candid, but for me, that for us, that might be our reaction because of the generation that we're in. But say for my brother, or maybe some of your friends, or maybe even some of your younger clients or classmates, they're like, okay, he's just telling it how it is. He's just telling the truth,
It just is,
It is.
So we want to kind of, before we end, we just kind of want to always try to leave on a positive note. Like, what are the next steps? Like, we are in the world of social media. It's not going away. What type of advice would you give, Stephanie and Valerie, for either our listeners, our clients, those who are interested in knowing how to coexist and maneuver with social media, but in a healthy way? What are your thoughts?
I think it's worth having a conversation, particularly within our field, because I know that this conversation is being had elsewhere. But I feel like who else to lead this than us? But in terms of like media literacy and social media literacy, I think that that's something that we could focus a lot on. And I think in terms of socio-emotional like education, I think that we really have an opportunity to like take the lead there. And as far as like the actual clinical work we're doing, it's so important to focus and to remember as clinicians that yes, we are mental health clinicians, and mental health includes like the environment of the people that we're serving. And, you know, humans are holistic. So we should be, you know, trying to gauge and assess where they are in terms of their self-esteem and, you know, what their interests are. You mentioned gaming and social media, and how many clinicians have I met that don't know different gaming platforms like Discord or like Twitch, and like what are they accessing there? You know, it's really important that when we are doing our assessments, that we're aware of what they also have access to and how that may be impacting them, because then we know where to build them up, and there we know how to provide that psychoeducation. Yeah, I think that that's a huge opportunity for us. The other thing is, I think it's really I mean, I think maybe a bold pro for me to think in terms of an opportunity for us is to see how our own field, like where we could do better, right? Because I think social media forces us to look at, for example, the DSM, and to reconsider, like if all these, you know, children, I mean, yes, I think it's important to look at things with a critical eye, right? To make sure that we know that it's not just like everyone has this one diagnosis, but to know there might be something here. Let's kind of, let's regroup. Like, why are all these people thinking this, right? And I think that that's really important for us to always keep an open mind. So I feel like that's my takeaway for mental health.
Well, Valerie, you put it in amazing words. I hate being after Valerie. She always has another quick way of speaking. But so I think as a public health student, a lot of the times because I'm an older student in the master's program that I'm in, I do see a lot of Gen Z, and I do see their own struggles, and a lot of the times I can't really relate from that mental health aspect because I'm not as involved. And I think the biggest thing to mention is we can have social media, we can continue it, but finding that balance as individuals. But then on the professional level is finding that balance of how we can incorporate it. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, and that's what public health right now is trying to incorporate. It's like we have all these issues, especially with Gen Z, but we don't have actual solutions from in community initiative perspective on how to address them. So I think instead of, because all the time, all my professors, they're like, oh, is social media good or bad? Da, 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 da. Like, instead of having that mindset, we need to have a mindset of how will we how will we make that change? How will we fit the needs of the generation that needs to help the most from us? Because at the end of the day, if you listen to the generation, they're going to tell you what's best practice and how we can achieve those goals. So definitely listening to our youth and figuring out from there. Yeah.
That's so simple. And we've heard that so many times. We adults are terrible at it. Listen to the young people because they will tell you the truth.
Yep.
And so with that, what else? Danielle,
I have enjoyed it. You know, ladies, we could go on and on and on about this topic. And maybe we could have you ladies on again. I think that we did a really good introspective look at social media. I think we did a really good job with looking at the different generations. We even threw some research in there, and then some possible outlook for what is to come for our generation, the ones behind us and the ones ahead of us, to just listen, to have an open mind. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I know you enjoyed the conversation too.
Absolutely. And I think key is finding that balance. We as mental health professionals, and you, Stephanie, in the public health world, trying to help people find that balance of how you should use social media responsibly and not let it control you. Because I think right now we are at the mercy of it as opposed to us controlling it.
Yes.
We haven't made that leap And so I think as we go through the years, hopefully we'll make that shift as a population, or maybe that the Gen Z generation may shift us because they got to keep it real.
They're gonna snatch the wheel from us.
Absolutely. So, ladies, again, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We've had a wonderful conversation about social media. My name is Danielle Young with my co-host Wendy Grier, where we're so excited and we're always striving to make a difference in mental health. We will see you next time.
Thank you, ladies.
Of course. Take care.